But I think what we should do now is go through the microphone positions, but I kind of want to start with the room sound.
Yeah, okay.
Because I just think that for me, is such an important part of this plugin. It's something which has me reaching for this plugin in situations where no other kind of plugin or impulses have kind of scratched that itch. So, why do you need a room impulse as opposed to taking your guitar and then putting like a room reverb on it? The difference here is this is actually a capture of the cabinet in the room. If you do what I just described, where you're taking like your guitar tone and you're adding like a roomy reverb to it, which can be a cool sound, it's like you have an isolation booth with a cabinet with your microphone on it, and then that's going out into a big room through like a studio monitor into this bigger room. And it's being filtered through that 57, and then it's being projected out into a room in a way that's different than this kind of really resonate-y kind of creaky bit of wood with 4 big speakers kind of attached to it. So there's something gets lost in translation there with regards to like the realism aspect of it actually sounding like you're standing in the room with a cabinet. But what we did here was the former, so you really do get that in-room sensation, I think. So in order to demonstrate these room sounds, Rabea had the great idea of moving to a single coil guitar. So he's got his lovely Strat here. We're still using the Friedman Twin Sister, which for those that don't know is kind of Dave Friedman's take on the very early Marshall amps, like the JTM 45 style thing. So it's a beautiful sounding clean amp. We've run it in the lower gain mode. We've switched off the pedal. So essentially this is just guitar into fairly low gain sound. And we're going to use the Woody cab, which, yeah, just a cool sounding cab to start with. Let's check out what the room mics sound like on their own, and then maybe blend in some close mic with that. And then I think it would be cool just to go back through all of the cabs again. I'll just have you play, and I'll change cab as we go. Yeah, cool. So you can kind of hear what it really was like in the room.
Sweet.
Just love it. It's so kind of enveloping.
Instant vibe.
Yeah.
For me.
It sounds like as a guitar player, like, I don't know, like going into like a gig in a really lovely sounding space or something and hearing someone warming up or...
Well, you said to me earlier, and I completely agree and can feel it in that, is that there's almost a directness to that room sound that allows you, because I've tried it with other room, IRs or whatever, and it's very much just roomy, and you don't get that thump and feel when you play the attack, so to speak, when you're playing, so you can really connect. Whereas with that, you can feel the attack almost, like the cab's close enough that you're getting some of that punch from it almost.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's a bit of just like confluence of lots of really lovely factors. I mean, a big one is that room just sounds amazing. It's, as I mentioned, it's really high, but there's a walkway and a couple of kind of stations at either end of the room, so you can kind of put your room mics up a level from the main kind of floor level, which is what we did here. We actually put room mics up in quite a few places. If you look at the promotional video for this, you'll actually notice there's like some Coles mics close to the amp. There's like a ribbon that's upper level. But when it came to actually auditioning them, that pair of U87s spaced apart on the kind of balcony overlooking down onto the amp, you could feel it. I kind of walked around finding the spot where the cab just sounded like it was most alive. And yeah, we pulled up those faders and it was just like, wow, that is the sound. And I tried, because I mean, we spent the time in placing those other mics. I tried blending them in, or we thought like, is it worth offering them? But to be honest, all of them they just paled in comparison to that sound, which it's got, because the room is really well designed, it's even though the mics are quite far apart, they still have a really lovely kind of thickness in the center. Yeah. Which, sometimes when you've got wide-spaced mics, it can kind of sound really weirdly separate. And that didn't happen here at all. So yeah, that's just it's where I place the mics too for doing drum recordings.
Right, okay. So it's
when
just
I'm in
a good
studio.
spot when you're there. Yeah, it's a secret spot.
Yeah,
nice.
Well, not so secret. But yeah, I'm just really, really over the moon. And I've caught myself like supposed to do something and kind of I'm jamming around and the room mics just kind of carry me off.
Yeah,
kind of
2 hours later.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
especially with this kind of tone too, I think.
Yeah.
So let's just quickly blend in like an SM57, just so you can get an effect of the room mics with the 57.
Okay.
Just so people can hear that. It's like almost comical, isn't it? Like when
I just lost all the vibe for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really. Oh wait. Oh yeah. No, we're back.
yeah, it's like one of those shreds videos or something for a second.
Yeah. It suddenly feels like something horribly wrong happened, but it didn't. You just took the room out and put it back.
It's amazing. I'm just genuinely a fan of whatever happened there. So for especially for lower gain stuff, I just think those room mics add so much. If you're a player that's not so much into recording or that's used to playing amps in the room, I think there's something that you'll find there that's going to be quite reassuring and recognizable, that just makes everything sound cool in a way that isn't like, I'm going to add some delay or like a...
I'm a huge fan of almost everything I ever do has room mic on guitar room sounds.
Right, okay.
Either ones that I've, up until this point, have sometimes make or find something that gets me close to that kind of sound. But I'll almost always have a little bit of that in there.
That's good to know. So for heavy stuff as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, I think that it adds a certain girth to the whole sound of the guitar for me that you can't really get from any other way other than having the room sound, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you like how this sounds as well. So I think what would be really cool to do now would be to go through all the cabs with the room mics so that you get that sense of what it was like.
Sweet.
But let's go with this setup we've got now, which is a little bit more gain than in the previous clips when Rabea was playing the Strat, just so you can really hear those differences. So let's go to Syrupy, the oldest one, and we'll go up in chronological order.
There we go. All right. It's great.
Yeah, it's fun to listen to. Like,
it sounds so good.
Awesome. I think it's one of the things that's interesting too is you can actually hear like the spread of the sound coming off the cabs. Like some of them sound more narrow and some of them sound kind of wider, and it is because we're recording again actual cabs with actual speakers that kind of disperse a bit differently, angled versus straight. We did put the cab as close to the same position every time as we could when we were changing them out, but even then you can hear them shift around just a little bit, so it's quite a cool document.
I don't know if it's what you said about the whole direct thing, but because you said that now, it's almost like pinpoint the feeling that I have, which is that you could legitimately just play guitar like you normally play with the room mic on its own, because it gives you just enough connection. Like it's fast enough, if that's the right word to use.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
When you're playing, so that you can enjoy it and play all that stuff, but then you just get that vibe of the room. Yeah, really like that. Especially,
I mean, hopefully this comes across on the video, but obviously you're hearing, you're attacking your guitar quite loud. You've got loads of string snap going on. So for jamming, you could probably get away with just room and hearing the sound of your actual acoustic guitar. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, we should go through the microphones. There's a lot to go through, guys. Thanks for bearing with us for this. It's probably going to be a multi-parter, I imagine. Let's use which cab? Let's pick a cab. Do you remember enough to have a favourite to go through the mics on?
Which is the one that I liked? The Barky one, I think.
You liked Barky. I think you liked Focused as well. I don't know which was.
Let's go Barky.
Barky. All right, cool. So
I use that word a lot. I use that word a lot.
Okay.
Barky.
Barky.
Yorkshire.
So let's do let's start with the SM57.
Yeah.
Because that's a good kind of north to bear in mind. Just to go through the options here, we've got an SM57, we've got the Fredman, which is it's an array of two SM57s, one on axis, one off axis, and it's pointed more like, so one's dead on and the other one's at an angle. It's a specific way of recording guitar, and because of the slight phase cancellation of the two mics, you actually get a slightly smoother sound. So that's why we included it. Lots of people seem to like the Fredman sound in the Cali pack as well. So we've got SM57, we've got Fredman, we've got a vintage 421. So this would have been a 70s era 421, which they sound quite different to the modern ones. They're a bit flatter. Still not my favorite microphone, not the most flattering, but it is one that's pretty vintage accurate. The MD441, however, for me was a real standout from the pack. This is you don't often see it used on guitar cabs, but it's got a lot of what I think the SM57 lacks on a greenback is compensated for in the 441. It's got like a more mid-forward voicing and a smoother top end, which works quite well with the more scoopy and bright sound of a greenback versus a vintage 30. So that's a really cool one to bear in mind. We've got the two ribbons, the Bayer M160, which is, it is a ribbon, but it almost sounds like halfway house between a ribbon and a dynamic. And then the Royer, which is, kind of most people's idea of what a ribbon on a guitar cab should sound like.
It's definitely one of my favourites.
It's good. Yeah. It's a really good sounding mic. And I think, again, more so than with vintage 30s, this mic really comes into its own on the greenback because it provides a lot more of that kind of beefiness. And if you're using like a traditional Marshall that doesn't have like a depth control, or it doesn't have as much low end by nature, you can then have something like the ribbon that's got this really extended low end, and it will give you more of that feeling. Yeah. And then we've got condensers. We've got the small diaphragm Neumann KM184, which is just it's a lovely sounding, quite neutral microphone. We've got the C414, which is quite a big sounding large diaphragm condenser. This is kind of one of the highly prized ones with the gold ringed, brass ringed capsule. And then we've got the vintage U67, which is a very, very expensive microphone and sounds really good on guitar. So that's a quick rundown. I'll talk a bit more as we play. We should choose a tone, though. I think maybe going back to a humbucker and higher gain could be a good call for this.
Sounds good. I agree.
Cool. All right, so Rabea's selected the Barkey cab, the black back cab. He's also selected the Modern Eagle, which is a good sounding just a really great sounding rock guitar. Still going into the twin sister, still using the Palilalia pedal. Gonna have to ask him how you say that.
Yeah, Palilalia.
All right, so SM57, as we talked about before, the Barkey cab is one of the brighter, edgier sounding ones, so it will probably quite clearly highlight where the SM57 maybe is lacking as a choice on a greenback, albeit you can still EQ it and kind of tame that wildness we spoke about. But yeah, let's give it a listen on the SM57. I'll move the knob around a bit and you get an idea of the breadth of tones on offer. It does sound very rock, doesn't it?
It does, very much so. It's straight away that I'm getting like Adam Jones vibes.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't play any Tool, but you know what I mean. Like gave me that. He's got a very snappy, barky kind of British sounding overdrive to me, and that lends itself to that.
I wonder what that cab did, because I know he typically uses, I think, like a Marshall cab and a Mesa Boogie cab in the studio. Okay. I don't know if that's still the case. But I wonder, I'm assuming it's probably a greenback cab. And I wonder if maybe it is with blackbacks in it. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's, the 57. As a solo isolated mono guitar, it sounds a bit edgy. But I bet if you double track that and pan them out to the sides and put them in a mix, you're not going to notice the kind of the leanness, and it's just going to sound really barky and in your face. So, so that's, there's no denying that's a great sounding combination. Let's now check out the Fredman. So if you start playing, I'll switch to the Fredman.
Okay.
Now the Fredman mic, I should just say, with all the cabs, there's no option of position because it's a specific thing that Fredman Studio came up with, and it's designed to be done a certain way. So we've just kept it pure in that sense.
Okay.
It's cool. I really like that on this cab, actually. On some of the cabs, I think the regular 57 sounds better. On some of them, I think the Fredman does that really cool thing of bringing the mids forwards and taking down some of the edge.
Yeah.
I think it does it really well
here.
Yeah. So that's the Fredman. I think maybe use the SM57 as like a palette cleanser every time. So if we go back to the 57, and then I'll be skipping over to the 421.
Okay.
There's just like this really whistly frequency in these microphones in general.
Yeah.
I think it might be the fact it's got that like metal bar that goes right around the front of the capsule that does something weird. But anyway.
People often compare them a lot to 57s, I find. Like, you either use one of those or a 57. There seems to be the juggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think Bob Rock kind of popularised using both.
I thought you were going to say Bob Ross.
No, not him. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
But no, Bob Rock, I think he liked to use both 57 and a 421.
Right, okay.
I know, like, Andrew Sheps, who's a really famous recording engineer and mixer. He likes to record with one of those dead centre.
Right, okay.
That's his like starting point, which is mind-blowing to me. I guess he sculpts it a lot afterwards or sets the amp a really specific way. But that kind of sharp spike in frequency, you can't undo that with the EQ on an amp. It's just way too broad.
Yeah.
It kind of needs to be something you do in post. But it does have this kind of like mid-forwardness once you get rid of that can be really useful.
I often find I come to this microphone after the fact. If, let's say, I've recorded something and I'm using some sort of IR software or plugin or whatever, where you can load up different mics, and I'll find that I often wouldn't, on the way in, choose to use it, but then afterwards sometimes it's like, oh, now it's slotted in.
Yeah.
That's how I usually find myself using that mic.
Yeah. I think I'm the same with a lot of these kind of non-57 alternatives where after the fact, especially if they're a bit edgier sounding, it's like as a player sometimes it can make you hold back a bit if you're monitoring that sound. But then as a mixer or as a listener, you might actually be like, oh, that's fine. It just brings it forwards or backwards in the mix a bit.
Yeah.
So one to bear in mind for blending or kind of doing a bit more EQing to get rid of that spike. So let's cleanse the old palettes, and then I'm going to go to the 441, which, as I say, is my kind of dark horse of the of this pack.
Nice.
There's a slightly kind of boxy character to the mid-range, but for me that's kind of part of the Sennheiser sound, I guess, that you hear in the 421 as well. And while I don't necessarily gravitate towards it, it does something in the mix.
For me, I feel like the first thing I thought was I'd blend this with something, is what I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
Just in the sense that it's not quite got everything that I'd look for out of the one sound, so I'd just add it with something else.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're trying to get 57 to work within Goldstack and you're finding it does perhaps have a bit too much on the extremes, particularly the top end, the 441 can be a really good way of
pulling it all in.
Yeah. Cool, as a blend or even on its own. All right, palette cleanser, then we'll do the M160 and the Roya.
Sweet. Whoops. Oh no!
Math Rocky, that'll work. You know? that could happen. So yeah, I mean, the M160 for me, like I was saying before, kind of like a midway point between a dynamic and the bigger, larger ribbon sounds.
Yeah.
You definitely get like this extension suddenly of low end where like the palm mutes sound bigger. It does have this upper mid-range kind of angry spike kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you can tame that with EQ. It's a really cool mic. Definitely one that we would always include in any kind of plugin like this.
It's just so common, you see it a lot, you know, that particular mic. When it comes to guitar tone, it's always included.
Yeah. Yeah, and with good reason, I reckon. But perhaps not as good reason as including the Roya, which I'm just going to go straight into because it's such a different sound.
Yeah.
I think everyone's going to be able to pick that out.
I just love the sound of a Roya 121 like that. Yeah, I can hear straight away. It's like home for me in a way because I use it all the time.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's there's something that's just very lush about it. Like loads of low end, a much more rolled off top. Bear in mind that with the Roya, the brightest setting on this will be dead center on the cab. I always did that because I mean it's dead center on the speaker, but the ribbon element's like this long, so it's really kind of covering the whole dust cap and the edges as well, which I think is one of the things that gives it that character. Is it's just such a big picture of the speaker in the way that something like, say, the 441, which is hypercardioid or supercardioid, it's got like quite a narrow focus on the speaker. The Roya is just like wide open in a way.
Yeah.
And not that you really hear it, but it does have a rear lobe here, which will be picking up some room ambience as well. It's subtle. I can't say I particularly pick it out.
It's the kind of I don't feel like I've ever had an instance where I've used it on its own, but I will almost always use it with a 57 or something to that effect.
Yeah. I mean, I think we should, you know what, while we're on it, let's do that. So classic setup actually is to put the Roya in the middle and then the 57 off to the edge. So I'll load up the 57 here next to it. Let's just keep them at equal gain, and I'll put the 57 at a slightly darker setting in.
Okay.
Let's just see what that sounds like. It's just great, isn't it? It's not to say there's like
full range vibe for me. It's just like I'm getting everything I want to hear from the guitar.
Yeah.
Generally more when I'm sat playing isolated guitar, it's more enjoyable having that combination for me.
Yeah.
Even if in the mix I start pulling out some of that stuff.
I think what could be interesting is in the mix with Goldstack, as opposed to with Kali or other V30 based products, is leaving the balance more even between the microphones and just maybe cutting some low end so that the low end of the Roya isn't dominating, but allowing that smoothness of the Roya to kind of smooth out the peaks in the 57 a bit like it is there. So yeah, it just sounds great. It's very musical, I think. And when you play the big chords and with this tone, which has got a bit of fuzz, not fuzz, but it's just,
on the edge.
Yeah, it's very pleasing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely going to be, you know, I'd say almost it could be a good starting point with each cab. If you want to get the vibe, would be load up Roya and 57 in equal balance, and maybe the room mic as well.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a fair representation. Cool. All right, so let's say bye to the 57. And then let's just do like let's go through the last. I'm going to stop doing the referencing to the 57 because we're getting into quite different sounding microphones now.
Yeah.
So let's go to the 184. Again, the brightest position is going to be right in the middle of the speaker. And it's quite a good balanced sound. So let's hear that and then I'll show you the kind of darker sounds.
Yeah, I like that.
It's good, isn't it? I mean, it's not fizzy. People think of a condenser and they think of like fizzy top end, but I mean, none of the condensers I picked for this have that, but especially this one, like a small diaphragm condenser, it's actually really smooth in the top end.
I was about to say smooth is the word I just used to describe that. Definitely, it's like bold in its mid range, but like very, very smooth and forgiving. In the top.
It's kind of lacking that presence bump that dynamics have.
Yeah,
which is a positive for exactly the reasons you just mentioned, but sometimes in the mix means it doesn't actually cut through as well as you'd like. But in a way, it's probably like a less coloured representation of that speaker.
Yeah.
And in the darker positions, it sounds like really usable. You could pretty much use that as a one mic solution, I think. Yeah. Cool. So let's go from there to the C414. Now this is the kind of the biggest sounding of the condensers. So let's give that one a try.
I love that.
Yeah, meaty.
Yeah.
It's
got a big smiley face vibe to it to me. Yeah. Like it has mids, but yeah, compared to the others, not so much. You just get this big bassy and trebly vibe.
Yeah,
which I like.
It always reminded me kind of thrash sound. Like when I first loaded it up and you started playing it, made me think of like kind of like early thrash tones or something. But yeah, I just love it. It's a slab of tone.
Yes,
and you're right. It is a bit scoot, but I mean, I just shy away from the tone because people might think it's like lacking musicality or something. But it's just like trimmed.
Yeah, in a similar way to the ribbon, to the 121 and the 57, I have found myself sometimes using the 414 and the 184 together for a similar thing, because it's almost like the 184 kind of sits right in between, in the middle.
Point, yeah.
I've found
makes sense.
Yeah, it's different vibe, but it sort of serves a similar purpose for where I'm using it.
It's a cool tip. I'll have to investigate that one more.
Oh yeah.
And let's go from that to the U67. Which I'm actually, after you've played for a while, I'm going to flick to the KM184 so you can hear the difference between like big tube microphone, very, very famous, expensive thing, and a relatively inexpensive small diaphragm condenser made by the same company. And they sound different, and there's awesome qualities to the U67, but you can hear the family resemblance even across the decades and the kind of the style of microphone. So this is the U67 again. I'll start in the brightest position. It's interesting because people think of a large diaphragm condenser and they think big low end, but that's not the case here. It actually feels more kind of high pass filtered. If anything, the 184 feels like it's bigger. Yeah. And I think it's also the fact that the 67's got more of a presence kind of peak going on. But yeah, I really wanted to make sure we included that microphone because, as I say, you know, that and the U87 is a very classic combination.
Right, okay. For guitars or?
I mean, talking in the 70s. And,
yeah.
You know, yeah, I think that is something that got used a lot.
Interesting. Because I don't know much about that particular microphone and where it was famous in guitar tone compared to the other mics.
I think, yeah, kind of going back to the time before really specialised close miking became a thing, you'd see people using those kinds of microphones. They do distort a lot. If you actually try and mic like a loud 412 with a U87, it can sometimes be a bit of a disappointment. Right, okay. Thankfully, again, one of the things that's cool about doing this capture process is we can do it at a level where it's not distorting and you get to hear it in all its glory. So So yeah, that's the full range of microphones that we've captured. Each and every one of those will have different sweet spots in every cab. So, you know, they're all worth exploring over time. You know, don't knock yourself out on day one with trying to get like to grips with every single combination.
Yeah.
The idea with this and with Kali is that there is something to last you a long time, and that different projects you could just choose. You could make a random pick almost. I'm going to use this cab. You know, just to limit yourself to something, and then try and figure out a balance of mics and mic positions that gives you something cool for that project.
That is worth saying. Even with Kali, I found myself like evolving what my go-tos over time using it over the last year or whatever, and that I'm sure will happen with this too. I'll have my go-tos in mind, you know, like the 1-2-157 combo, but then I might find that it's completely different in a few months when I've had a chance to get used to it, you know.
Yeah, that's the joy, that's the excitement for me in putting this out in the world, is the knowledge that there's so much for people to mix and combine within this. And that they're going to be able to get something unique, because it wouldn't feel the same, as I was saying before, to simply put out a single cab, even if it was all the speakers in a cab or something, where, you know, it would feel like people would hear the sound, get used to it, have their favourites and move on, or want to move on. And so, yeah, it feels really good to put something together that's more of like an encyclopedia that people can kind of go into whenever they want to, and find new exciting tones.
And you also, I think it's probably worth saying that you said that you could also use these with the Kali as well, if you wanted to blend speaker tones, which is something I like to do historically as well when I'm messing around with guitar sounds, which you could actually do with this because it's all phase. You've made sure it's all.
Yeah. So I mean, to clarify, we don't yet have the ability to just like from a menu be able to select Kali cabs within Goldstack, but what you can do is use the export feature. So if you found a sound in Goldstack that you really like, a combination of mics, you could hit export. That would make a single wave file that you can put on your modelers of choice, whether it's like Quad Cortex or Fractal or whatever, or you could load into your plugins that have an IR loader just so it's there rather than needing to run Goldstack as well.
Yeah.
And you could load that into Kali, and it is all phase accurate.
That's
the other
awesome.
thing you could do is use busing. We did that earlier, where you know, have your guitar go into a channel and then send it out to two buses. So after the amplifier stage, before the cabinet stage, send it to two buses, have Kali on one, Goldstack on the other, and you could kind of have both running in real time. It is a classic thing to do, to blend like a V30 cab and a greenback cab. So
nice.
Yeah.